Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the transcendent self and how teaching about the transcendent self and understanding what it is can be really transformative for you and if you have any clients or people like that. So my name is Shamash. I'm author of Mindfulness for Dummies. And actually, I'm going to show you some different books that help me to get this insight about the transcendent self and my journey into it. So I first learned about this concept of not just being my thoughts and my emotions back in my early 20s. Let me just explain what I mean by that transcendent self, because that might be a bit confusing to start with. So I guess there's two ways of seeing the world. One of them is a fully materialistic world. So everything is just physics and science and material, and there's nothing else. And then there's another way or a viewpoint that there's something more than just the material world. And I guess what the transcendent self is saying is that there's something beyond just our physical reality. Now, I'm not so much into, generally speaking, into spiritual stuff, actually. Especially when I was younger, I was more into science and understanding everything materialistically. But when I started looking at the world and the universe and the incredible order, like, you see the sun rising and the earth rotating around the solar system and the incredible order of all the plants and animals and all that. Yes, there is evolution, but there's still laws underlying everything. So where does that come from? And why is there all this rather than absolutely nothing? So it seemed to me something beyond just that material world. And the first time I got that insight about it was when I was taught about the concept of the observer self, when I did my first mindfulness or meditation practice. And the teacher said that you're having your thoughts, you're having your emotions, but you're having this experience. The fact that you're observing it and you can notice your thoughts and emotions, that means you're not that. And that is your transcendent self, your observer self. That is the pure awareness, which is what we all are. And they just showed us books after books and insight after insight about this. So just to show you a few kind of books that kind of got me into it. So one of them is this version with this cover is actually not available, but this book is available. It's called the 10 Principal Panishads, and it's based on a philosophy called Advaita. And Advaita is the ancient, I guess, Indian or Asian philosophy, which underlies that religion, and actually most philosophies, because most ancient philosophies say that, yeah, there is a sense of separation, but underneath that separation, there's a sense of connection. And so these are 10 of the key ancient texts based on it. One of them, I remember, it's the very first one, is called the Isho Punishad. Everything that lives is full of the Lord. And for me, the word Lord would be awareness or consciousness or energy. So everything that lives is full of awareness. Claim nothing, enjoy, and do not covet his or her property. Then hope to live for 100 years of life doing your duty. No other ways can prevent deeds from clinging, proud as you are of your human life. And then it goes on to say this wonderful paragraph. The self is one, unmoving, it moves faster than the mind. The senses lag, but self runs ahead. Unmoving, it outruns pursuit. Out of self comes the breath that is the life of all things. Unmoving, it moves, is far away yet near, within all, outside all. Of a certainty, the person who can see all creatures in him or herself in all creatures, knows no sorrow. And it goes on. The self is everywhere, without a body, without a shape, whole, pure, wise, all-knowing, far-shining, self-depending, all-transcending, in the eternal procession, assigning to every period its proper duty. I haven't read this actually for maybe 10 years now. It's really good to see it again. So that book's called the 10 Principal Panishads. You may enjoy that one. It's by, this particular one's is co-translated by W.B. Yeats. That's a good translation. So that started to give me some ideas about this concept of a transcendent self. Then you probably heard of this, Tao Te Ching. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure, actually. That starts to kind of point towards it as well in many beautiful ways. And another, not ancient actually, maybe, how old is this? Maybe 50 years or something. I've recommended this book before as well. And this is by an Indian sage, although he was actually just working in a sweet shop in, I think somewhere, not in Mumbai, somewhere in India. And he got discovered as being very wise and insightful. So that was a good one too. So that's from the kind of Eastern approach. But then a lot of you may have even read this book, Flow. And Flow is a very, very popular psychology book by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And even that touches towards the concept of the transcendent self, because of what he found through his research. And he's a huge guy in positive psychology and science of happiness. What he found is that when people get totally engrossed and engaged in what they're doing, they forget their sense of self. And that gave me the insight that actually this ego self, this individual self, is useful from time to time. But actually, when we really want to get into something and do something successfully and be fully enjoying it, doing it, when we're doing it, we need to lose that sense of self. We need to lose ourselves. And the transcendent self is that sense of when you forget about your small individual self and you connect with that universal self. And although I use the word self, and I know in Buddhism they use the concept of no self, but I think what they're trying to say is that no ego self in that case. So it's really, really important. So the first insight I want to share with you is this one, that our transcendent self is the deepest part of yourself. It's your true nature. It's not something that you can easily prove. It's almost an intuitive insight that you may or may not have. And I found it coming back to it again and again, despite being very much into science and all that stuff. And actually, I was a physics teacher, so I love all that stuff. But this insight kind of keeps coming back in the back. So I believe it to be true. Second point is to appreciate that you're more than just your passing thoughts and emotions. And by having that insight, you have a positive impact on your mental health. And I discovered this much more recently when I studied ACT. And I read a few books on ACT, including this one, which is called A Liberated Mind by Stephen Hayes. And ACT is a very, very fast-growing therapy, which includes mindfulness in it. And one of the chapters in this book is actually called The Transcendent Self, I think. Yeah, chapter... No, actually, it's called The Art of Perspective Taking, page 171. But he kind of alludes to it as being a transcendent self. You can see I made a lot of notes here. So what Stephen Hayes found, is that the thing that can really improve your mental health and well-being is psychological flexibility. And psychological flexibility is the ability to be in the here and now, the present moment, and to be able to focus on your values, what's really important to you in the moment, and not be too affected by your difficult thoughts and emotions that may come up when you're doing what you're passionate about, what you value. And he found 6 different factors to help you to achieve this. And one of them is to have this perspective taking self, or your transcendent self. And in fact, the whole of what he developed, that whole program of ACT, was developed through a spiritual experience he had, where he stepped out from his thoughts and emotions and he saw that he was not his thoughts. And that was the key moment where he got this sense of freedom. And he spent, decades and decades researching what happened and what are the different factors that helped him to achieve that insight. And now it's become one of the fastest growing therapies with huge amounts of evidence, arguably more evidence than any other approach or therapeutic model. So that's the second reason it's really important for us to think about seeing ourselves from a different perspective. And I call it transcendent self. You can call it whatever you want, but not seeing yourself just as the small individual self and believing all your thoughts and emotions to be absolute fact. And then the third thing is I like to talk about, to practitioners, if any of you are out there, therapists and coaches and stuff. And when you're guiding mindful exercises and mindful meditations, just remind of your students of this awareness that is behind the thoughts and the emotions, to take a different perspective of their situation and just emphasizing the fact that it really, really matters. Like, I mean, psychological flexibility can predict so much. I mean, look at this. This is an amazing paragraph. So this is what it says. I've studied a small set of skills, and the small set of skills are the skills that lead to psychological flexibility, that say more about how human lives will unfold than any other single set of mental or behavioral process known to science. This is not an exaggeration. In over 1,000 studies, we found these skills help determine why some people thrive after life challenges and some don't, why some people experience many positive emotions like joy, gratitude, compassion, curiosity, and others very few. Psychological flexibility predicts who is going to develop a mental health problem such as anxiety, depression, trauma, or substance abuse, and how severe and long-lasting the problem will be. Psychological flexibility predicts who will be effective at work, who will have healthy relationships, who will succeed in dieting and exercise, who will rise to the challenges of physical disease, how people will do in athletic competition, and how they will perform in many other areas of human endeavor. So it's a set of skills called psychological flexibility. And his definition is the ability to feel and think with openness, to attend voluntarily to your experience in the present moment, and to move your life in the direction that's important to you, which I was talking about, your values. Building habits that allow you to live life in accordance with your values and aspirations. It's about learning not to turn away from what is painful, instead turning towards your suffering in order to live your life full of meaning and purpose. And then he goes on to explain why would you want to turn towards your suffering, and he explains it's because it's avoidance. When we avoid difficulties and challenges, that leads to a lot of suffering. And ACT, mindfulness, a lot of ancient traditions, they all talk about trying to reduce your suffering. And how do you reduce your suffering? By reducing the resistance towards the difficulties and challenges that you faced, and having the skill to open up towards it. So yeah, I covered a lot today. I'm passionate about this topic, especially about teaching about the Transcendent Self. So let me know in the comments below what you thought about that, any insights you have about the Transcendent Self, or perspective taking, or psychological flexibility, or anything, and I'm happy to answer them. All right, have a great day. Bye for now.